One,
It's right over there.
two, three, and we are live. This is not Saturday Night Live, but it's almost as good. Actually, it's probably even a little better and certainly more beneficial to your life. Welcome, everybody. My name is Barry Shore. I am the ambassador of joy, and I am here today with two and probably, hopefully, the third person who is going to rock your world because your world is being rocked. You know, that what we call shift is taking place in life. And most people have a little bit of an issue pronouncing the F in shift, and the other stuff happens. And that's probably what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about shifting in the sense of being married and then not, and what that means, and how people who were married and involved and committed now find themselves in the process of what we call in America divorcing, and doing it with a what we call the I word, integrity. And I want to welcome three remarkable people in addition to myself. I'll do a brief introduction, then I'm going to ask each one of them to keep their introductions brief, literally a minute or less, and just tell everybody that this is a service, a public service for people worldwide, because marriage is one of the most remarkably beneficial processes that any human being could enter into. By the same token, oftentimes, more so than most people want probably, but oftentimes there needs to be a, for want of a better term, an escape valve, a release valve that we call divorce. The ability to now separate from that once growing, committed, loving process into another growing, committed, loving process that may not involve the same proximity, but certainly two souls uniting for the benefit of each other and hopefully their progeny. So we've assembled three other remarkable people in addition to myself. And I'm going to just tell a brief story and then ask everybody to introduce. The brief story is that I was having a conversation with wonderful SD Rand, or SD Star, and she is both gold coin and a star with a double R. We were talking about any number of things, and she mentioned that part of her world is that she is a divorcee, as we used to say, a divorced person, woman, and that it took her a number of years, but she now is in the world of divorce with integrity. And when she had said those words, it just struck me so deep. It resonated with me. And I jumped out of my chair, even though I can't do that, but I figuratively jumped out of my chair and said, Esty, that is remarkable. That is fabulous. We need to talk to people about that. Would you be willing to do that? And she said yes, because she wants to share journey and wants to help everybody and anybody to recognize that, let's say, get rid of the stigma, the angst, and how do you do it in the most positive, purposeful, powerful, pleasant way possible. And I also mentioned to her that we have another webinar that we do monthly, we've been doing for a number of years with a very large following worldwide. And that webinar is called the Marriage Webinar. So what a great bookend. Now, it happens to be that one of the people who's on the panel of this show with Joe and Lori and Esty and me, Barry Shore, your humble host, is Lori, the wife expert, who's also on the marriage webinar. So she's going to bring some pixie dust with her and talk about both sides. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce myself last, but I'm going to ask Esty if you would be kind enough to take the stage front and center and share in hopefully a minute or maximum two, something about you, who you are, your journey, and what we want to accomplish on today's and going further, the Divorce with Integrity webinar.
Sure. I'm really excited we're doing this. Just to piggyback on your story about the creation of it, I spent the last 10, 12 years with my focus as wife, mother, business owner, community leader. And then it all kind of bottomed out in one fell swoop when to me, essentially my life imploded. And over the last 2 years, and this is what I was expressing, I feel like my chief accomplishment as, my business imploded, was no longer a wife, stepped out of the community, was just that I got a divorce with integrity. And that's not nothing, but that became so much of my biggest accomplishment in my spare time. I have 5 children that I really, really like and take care of, and a multinational business consulting firm and business school that guides micro business owners to actually live their business dream, to do what they love, earn buckets of money, and have time for their life and family, and have that stability and clarity on how to do it. No more marketing slot machines or throwing spaghetti at the wall. We teach real business and marketing strategy and guide them through. So that's me.
Thank you, Esty. Joe Applebaum, actually, Esty is resident in Los Angeles, California, and Joe is holding down the fort on the East Coast in New York. Joe, tell us a little bit about you and your process in this scope of things called marriage and divorce.
Thank you so much for having me here, Barry. I love the way you put people together. So for me, for me, all I knew was a family. Like all I knew was like, get married, have kids, no matter what, you stay together and you just live your life like that. I didn't know that divorce was even an option. Like for me and my family, nobody's divorced. Like that's not an option. And when push comes to shove, at some time, things change. And I've always been the leader, just like I'm the only successful entrepreneur in the family as well. I built one of the fastest growing companies in America. So I was kind of like the person who's always like making changes and doing things that are just not the status quo. And about 2 years ago, when the pandemic started, we decided to get separated and start the process of divorce, which has been a very long, very difficult process. And I have 5 children. And the one thing that we did with integrity was that we sat the kids down after me reading a book called Intelligent Divorce, and we told the kids in a unified front all the different things. We wrote a whole script, went to a psychologist, reviewed it with the psychologist, made sure that we were doing the right thing, because ultimately at the end of the days, it's not about the relationship so much. For us, it's really about the kid. And if not being married anymore is better for the kids because we're in a parenting marriage, then that's the best thing possible. But growing up in an ultra orthodox community, for me, that's the biggest stigma. And I had a lot of voices in my head saying, you can't do this. You're going to be destroyed. This is the last thing you can do. And coming up on the other side of that, and it being public knowledge, I realized that it actually makes me a lot stronger.
Okay, let's hold right there. So, because you said a lot of different things, which we'll unpack during the program. Thank you. Wonderful Lori, the wife expert. Now, Lori has a remarkable story, which we're not going to go into right now because it'll take too long. But if you'd be so kind, give us the thumbnail, 1 or 2 minutes, and why I specifically asked you to be involved here, because of your expertise with a lot of women primarily in situations.
I help women who want to stay married, or I help men who want to stay married. Sometimes I get calls from people so I'm a coach. So whatever you want, I will help you get it. So I have a lot of people that call me and say, what do you think? What should I do? And I've been doing this since 2013, and I've followed people and I've interviewed thousands of people over the age of 70 who have regrets or not regrets. And I can kind of like sense what's going to happen in these people's lives. So when they tell me, hey, here's what's happening, here's my situation, here's what's going on, should I stay or should I go? I don't always tell people to stay. Sometimes I say, you can stay, but here's what your life is going to look like. And I only know that because of I don't need to reinvent the wheel. Many people have shared that with me. So sometimes it's not a good idea to stay together. But if you're not going to stay together, you need to separate or go your own ways. And you have to do that with love and kindness. We don't implode things and destroy things. We got to get to the other side with love, empathy, consciousness, and just being there for each other, because it's hard. You're walking beside each other.
Thank you so
Integrity.
much. Thank you. Let me just tell you my particular introduction. I am known as the ambassador of joy. Now, joy is a remarkable acronym. It stands for Journey of You. That's why I emphasize that this show is about joy, journey of you. And that journey often takes winding, circuitous, and off the road paths, as each one of us has said so far. And I know a little bit about the story of each one. We won't go into details unless it's necessary as we go forward in our discussion. But suffice it to say, I am married for 45 years. I do tell people I'm happily married for 45 years. And during those 45 years, there have ever been times when the idea of divorce loomed? Well, hello, human. I mean, life is an amazing adventure. I think we'll all agree to that. But one thing that you've heard so far, and we have, by the way, I've been touched so far by hundreds of people who received notices about the fact that we're doing this. This is a breakthrough in podcasting, because most podcasts are either fluff. Nothing wrong with that, by the way. Sometimes fluff is really nice. So a lot of podcasts are about money, how you want to make more money, how you can do this. Very nice thing. A lot of them about politics. Very few people, very few podcasts go to the very heart of life, which is living with another being, creating something we call family, even if you don't have children from that marriage, but still you created a relationship with other people because you're all related now to other people, aunts and uncles and grandparents and such like that. But if you have children, that becomes an even greater situation. And to be able to have this level of integrity amongst people that I respect and love, like Joe and Esty and Lori, to be able to share with other people is really remarkable. I said I have hundreds of people that sent in comments and questions. So with your permission, each one of us, let's just dive right in and discuss. One of the interesting questions that has come up, as I said, it has hundreds. I'd say this question came up about 35, maybe 38 times. And I'm just going to take the variations of the question, put it in my own words, and say the following. The question was the following: said, gee, that's a great title, Divorce with Integrity. Is that even possible? Okay, I mean, you all hear it, right? It's sort of the obvious question. So what I'd like to do is go in the order we just started. We'll have Esty and then Joe and then Lori. We just go to it and speak your mind and say, give us a little bit maybe about your journey and your thoughts. Is divorce with integrity even possible, or is it just fluff and an oxymoron?
Well, I obviously believe it is because I believe I did it. So I definitely do. And I also believe that it's a choice that any one person can make. Right? It's not dependent on the other. It's not like, well, I can't have divorce with integrity if my ex doesn't have integrity. And you know what he did yesterday? And you're out, right? You're out. You're right in the ring. It's just choosing to act in every moment in your integrity. That is it. And if the other person plays along, even better. And by the way, eventually they do, because eventually there's nothing there. There's just nothing there. You know, I teach a principle for many years. In addition to business, I've taught personal development for many years, spirituality. And so one of the things that I taught for many years, I call Velcro and marble. And I think that Velcro and marble. I made it up. And original teaching was dealing with abusive personalities or difficult personalities, because the word abuse is taboo. You're not allowed to say that, right? But dealing with challenging, abusive personalities. I had a cough, sorry. Abusive personalities. And so I call it Velcro and marble. And Velcro is made of hooks and eyes, right? That's what Velcro is. It's a bunch of eyes and hooks. That's right. If you have little hooks and you have a sweater, it'll loop into your sweater because the sweater is little loops. Now, when someone is hooking you, triggering you, right? Acting out of integrity, if you don't have a loop, there's nothing for them to do. If you're marble, try sticking Velcro to marble. It doesn't stick, right? It's just when you have a hole. When you work on yourself, when you become whole with it, with whatever the it is in your world, there's nothing for them to hook. It doesn't matter. And I give you client examples because I do that a lot in my work. And this principle of integrity, I feel like we can look at the same way. It's about becoming marble, not becoming stone, not freezing your heart, not shutting down. It's about becoming whole. Because when you have those holes, right? So HOLE versus WHOLE. When you have those spaces, those loops, then those hooks will come at you and you're in. But if you don't, right, I'm very tall. I am 5'9" barefoot. If someone meets me and they're like, you know, Esty, I like you. You're really short though. You might want to work on that. That doesn't hook me at all. I just look at them like, I think you're weird. I think you're weird. I'm tall for a human and I'm very tall for a woman. So that is not a thing that gets me. I'm completely whole with it. And if they say, you know, you're really going to have trouble finding a man because you're tall, that also doesn't get me. I don't have a problem with it. And that's it. It doesn't get me. But there are people who get very taken by their height, short, tall, medium, rocky. I have no idea. When you are whole with something, you are in integrity with it and nothing can pull you out.
This is wonderful. To unpack a couple of things that you just mentioned. So in my best-selling book, The Joy of Living, that was a plug, shameless, but it was a plug. One of the chapters is called Becoming Emotionally Bulletproof. And like you just mentioned, not becoming stone, not becoming hard, but recognizing that when people say things, that's what they say. It doesn't have to stick on me. You know, like I can listen and maybe some of it might be right. And the word whole is really fascinating because it is spelled the same, pronounced the same way, whether you're H-O-L-E, meaning empty, or W-H-O-L-E, meaning full.
Yep.
It's the same thing. Matter of fact, if you make a circle and you say, well, that's a hole. Yes, it looks like it's empty to some people. It looks like, wow, everything in that circle is full. It's all in there.
Oh, it's the same. It's just perspective. And whatever someone throws at you is just their projection. You're only going to feed into it if you feed into it. It's them.
Okay, we're going to be that is really a fabulous segue. We'll be going to talk about projection because that's one of the great questions that came in. Joe, so is it possible truly to have divorce with integrity?
Some people believe that it's not possible to have integrity, period. Forget about divorce.
Thank you. I was waiting for you to say that.
Integrity is something that people often also confuse with morality as well. And I believe in my book, High Energy Purpose, I speak about what integrity even is. And I compare it to, and I love the analogy of the hole and the hook. That is amazing. I've never heard that before, and it's really great. The one that I've heard before and that I use frequently is like a bicycle. If a bicycle wheel has spokes and some of the spokes are missing, the wheel is going to be a little wobbly and it's not really going to have integrity because it's not going to really work well. It doesn't make the wheel bad. If divorce doesn't have integrity, it doesn't make divorce bad because we're not judging it. It's just not going to be smooth. So is it possible for it to work the way it's supposed to work? By definition, divorce is when something is not working, you're trying to change the scenario to make the relationship or the lack of relationship work in a different format, maybe by having a financial arrangement, maybe by having a custody arrangement, because whatever was happening before wasn't working. So we have to shift it and change it to reestablish integrity. When something doesn't work because it lacks integrity, then you can reestablish integrity by having a different agreement, by changing the way that it operates. And so I believe that divorce is just shifting a state of how things are. And because it's very public, because it involves, like Barry said, the in-laws and the families and the uncles and the aunts and the community and everybody's involved, people end up having conversations and gossiping about it. And there are many things that are outside of our control. And to Este's point, the only thing that you can really control is your thoughts and your feelings. And if you have that bulletproof thoughts and feelings, and by doing personal development, by having awareness, by having consciousness, and realizing that this is for the benefit, this is for the benefit of the family, this is for the benefit of the children, this is for the benefit of the next 7 generations, and to also fix what wasn't fixed in the previous 7 generations of generational trauma, you start realizing that not only does divorce have integrity, divorce is how you establish integrity in the relationship to begin with.
Let's unpack a couple of things. And yes, I'd like Esty to say something. You hit the proverbial bullseye, in the sense that it's not so much divorce with integrity, it's living with integrity in oneself. I'm going to make this as a categorical statement. It may or may not be true certainly for everybody, but when we enter into marriage, oftentimes we do so in a starry-eyed manner, and we don't tend to think about integrity, only because, well, it's a given. Of course I mean, that's how I am. And only oftentimes when you live with someone else and you recognize that how should we say it, rubbing against each other for the benefit, as you said,
Friction.
the positive,
Yeah.
brings out those pieces in you that, well, maybe they're not the highest of integrity. And we all need work. We're all work in progress. So I love that idea. And I want to use the word integrity to be also as a part of the integral nature of the human. Part of marriage, in my humble opinion, was to be able to grow. Oftentimes you get to a point where divorce may be the best stepping stone to growth. But we'll unpack a lot of other things. Wonderful Lori, let's go to you, because again, you work with a lot of people. You had trauma in your personal life, and I know we may bring it out later, but and you were on the verge and the edge. But tell us, what is it about the idea of divorce with integrity that you are able to speak with the many dozens, if not hundreds, of people that come to you? And I must tell you personally, I'm sort of shocked when an adult person, usually a woman, comes and says, "What do you think, Lori? What should I do?" As opposed to, "Well, gee, I'm a human being. This is what I think I should do, Lori. What do you think?" As opposed to saying, "Gee, help me. I'm just a child. I need to know." I'm projecting when I say that. Is it possible to have divorce with integrity? And do you help people if they need to take that road?
Yeah. So integrity starts with the letter I. And if we can just keep that in mind, it's I. And it doesn't, like what Etsy said in the beginning, it's not what your partner does. And it's like, well, I can't act with integrity if my husband's not acting in integrity. And that is really when you own who you are. And it's a growing experience. And as much as you're growing with your partner during a divorce, we have to step away and we have to grow ourselves. And no matter how weird or angry or bitter the other person is at blaming you, all we do over here is think about, okay, what did I do wrong? And how can I fix that in the future? Because if you blame them, you're forever going to be at a loss because you don't control them. But if you go, well, what did I do wrong? And how can I learn from this? Integrity, then I can move forward because I own me and I can change me and I have control over me. And so I try to teach people that when they come to that place and they go, well, he did this or she did this, it's like, it's not about them anymore. Now we're on our own. Let that go. We are going this way. And now what can I do to think about? Because you can't leave a marriage without really understanding where it went wrong, because you're going to repeat that same pattern. So having that, I screwed up these 5 things. And so the next time I am going to be really careful about, blaming him and, calling him names, all the things that we do as, stupid human beings that we can be when we're stuck in a marriage where we're, it's a very angry position to be in. And finding that place of saying, it's okay, I'm okay, I will make it through this. We're not as angry. And I think because when someone says, let's get divorced, the last thing anyone's thinking about is, oh, let me be integral. Let me do this the right way. That's not what happens. But we find that space later. And, I help people find that quicker. And hopefully this webinar will help people find that quicker too.
And that is the hope, by the way. That's why hundreds of people have already sent in questions and such. And when we propagate this, I think there'll be many thousands, if not tens of thousands of people around the world who'll be leaning in and listening, saying, oh, you mean some of this is about me? I have to do some work oh, because you just said very nicely, it starts with the I. And yes, divorce is taking that beautiful picture. Like, this is my mind's eye saying it, taking that beautiful picture everybody has of at the wedding ceremony, the love and the eyes and looking at each other, holding hands, whenever something happened, and just sort of and ripping it apart, having two pieces. And can they still have faces that are loving and kind and giving? In other words, just because they're ripped apart, does that mean that someone now becomes angry and intensely, using the I, intensely blaming? Because if you stay in that space, not only can you not have integrity as a human being, but you won't have integrity in the divorce process. And let's bring kids into this, that becomes the biggest issue of all, using I in all of these words: issue, kids. The I seems to be popping up in a lot of places. And I want to just mention, you said also the ability to interrupt the pattern. So we all know the term pi, P-I. You can't build anything in the world unless you know what pi is. Now, pi is 3.14 and infinitely numbers going along. So that's pi in the mathematical sense. Pi in the human sense stands for pattern interruptus. It's important to interrupt patterns only because it enables you to step aside and look at yourself and saying, sure, did you just say that? I spoke to my wife that way? Hello? Now, she obviously waved at me and said, hello, did you do that? But the ability for self to examine and to recognize, wait a minute, that's not living with integrity. I want to live with integrity. I want that wheel to be whole and be a W-H-O-L-E, and to be complete and be good and be giving. Okay, thank you. This is great. Let's go to another question that each one of you have already talked about. It's interesting because obviously our questions are coming from people who are either in the process of, have experienced, or been products of divorced households, because it's not that uncommon today. When I was growing up, I'm older than each one of you, as you can see. Yeah, I don't know if you can tell that, but I am older than every one of you here. In that I may even be older than if you combine several ages. But when I was growing up, divorce was called a broken home. The good news is we don't call it that anymore. And part of it is because I believe, based on what Joe is saying, Esty and Lori, is that there is a conscious awareness that taking responsibility, assuming responsibility, goes a long way to pushing aside the stigma of broken home and saying, how can we establish a different kind of home? So one of the questions that comes up very frequently is the use of words. Joe, you said this actually, to align thoughts and deeds. And there's three pieces in the alignment. It's your thoughts, your words, and your deeds. So let's talk. The question comes out somewhat like this, Esty. Again, I'm amalgamating 30 questions and such. Is it even possible to speak negatively about the ex? I'm making a caveat here. When you have children, this is all about their children in the picture. Is it even possible to speak negatively about the ex if children are either around or could hear of it? Your thoughts, please.
I would say it's almost impossible to speak negatively about your ex, even if they're not around, and have them not be affected. And this is something I received very early on, and I'm very grateful. The property manager at my old home, before I moved out, I reached out to her, was like, hey, so I'm getting divorced and I'm leaving. How does that work on our rental contract that we're both signed on? And she was a divorced woman herself. And one of the tips she gave me, and this was a combination of her and another woman who was an intimacy coach who was actually my client at the time. So like the combination of their wisdom is what I absorbed and turned into mine. And what I took away was, your kids are a product of you and your former spouse. Any negativity that you say or that they hear or feel from you about your spouse, That is a part of them. That is a direct criticism on a part of them. And that blew my mind. Right? Because I knew it. Yeah. And I've seen so many stories. One of the reasons why we're here today, why I went through the process I did, is because I've seen so many of my friends go through horribly bitter divorces and was just like, if I'm doing this, I'm not doing it like that. That's my whole life, right? Don't try harder, try different. I'm not doing it like that. And the understanding, I already knew it's not good to talk bad about anybody, right? I've been working on my language for many, many years, and positive only. It's my blood type, be positive. So, if you ever see me injured and bleeding out, be positive. Just, hook me up. And to me, that's my essence. And if you talk bad about your ex to your children, you have just insulted your child to them. And so for me, I always made a point, and this was part of what I took away from those two wonderful humans, to compliment, even in my biggest struggles. And we're not going to talk details, but even in some of my hardest moments and days, when it was hard to even breathe and deal with what was happening, I would try to look for, like, my ex has beautiful eyes, and much of my kids inherited his eyes. I think they're gorgeous colors. And I would compliment their eyes. Like, you have Tati's eyes. They're so beautiful, your green eyes. Right. And my kids still say, like, I got the best of you and Tati. One of my kids says that all the time. They wouldn't be able to say that if I had been virulently against him. And I give him credit that I, under the impression he did the same for me. All right. Or they wouldn't. That is such a big deal.
As we began, I said, good day, beautiful, bountiful, beloved, immortal beings, and good-looking people. And remember, you're good-looking because you're always looking for and finding the good. And that's what Essie just said. In the midst of, I won't even say the words. Yeah. She was thinking, what can I find that's good to focus on, so that I can shift? Remember, you got to be careful with those F's. Get that F and F in there. The shift to be able to speak in such a way that's positive about the X, because you're dealing with the most fragile, the most beautiful, the most wonderful beings in the world. Your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 kids.
Yeah. And to be clear, I wasn't talking about him. I think that would have been way harder.
Yes.
I was talking about them. Yes. Wow, you're so good at this, or your eyes look so beautiful today. Those are Tati's. It's the thing about them. They got it from him. I can compliment it in them. And that's a lot easier than trying to compliment a human who you're currently challenged with.
But you were looking for the good. That was the point. I was
looking for the good on purpose.
Right.
Very much.
So, Joe, in the same vein, talk to us about words vis-a-vis kids. And the X, of course.
Yeah, words vis-a-vis kids and the X. For me, it's more about not talking about the person, because whether it's positive or negative that you're speaking about it, it can be construed as negative. Because sometimes we give compliments to people that are either sarcastic, or they're like, oh, that person's a really great person. And our tone, because subconsciously we're hurt or we feel resentment or whatever it is, it's going to come across in a way that it will be perceived. No matter how you say it, it will be perceived. If you're talking about somebody else and they're not feeling good about you, if you give them a compliment, you're spitting in their face. So for me, and the way that I view it is, and the way that I got coached to deal with it is, don't talk about the other person, period. It's not your place. Don't mention them. Don't talk about them. Don't gossip. Don't mention that they're good. Don't mention that they're bad. Don't mention anything. The less you say, the better you are. And it's a very powerful lesson for me, just in general, to know, like, don't talk about people. That's it. I think it says something like, great people talk about ideas, and average people talk about things, and then small people talk about people. So I was always against gossip, period. But especially during a difficult time, a separation, a divorce, or any time of that stuff, like, I don't even mention it. I don't even mention, because it's so easy for my subconscious to creep in and start judging and start, making facetious compliments and like saying things that will just awaken and do things. And of course, knowing that the mother is, or the father is, part of the children, knowing that it represents who they are. Anything that you say is representing the kids, is realizing that anything that you say, not just about them, but also about their family. Because often we'll say, oh, no, that person's a good person, but let me tell you about their family and where they came from. And it's not their fault that they're like that because of the way that they grew up. And all that stuff, any talk about any of that stuff is already going too far, in my opinion. So for me, it's just about don't mention it, don't speak about it. If you get asked a question, have a politically correct answer about your feelings. Always use the I. If you want to have integrity, like Laurie said, I love that. Always use the I, and always just talk about how you feel, and don't include the other person because it's not your point to share your opinion about the other person. Other people's opinions are none of your business, and your opinion of other people are none of their business. So just keep it to yourself. If you have a therapist, I would recommend definitely getting a therapist because that's a great place to say everything that you need to say in confidence. And if you don't have one, create a journal and get everything out on a journal, because as human beings, we do want to talk about how we feel and we need to express. And sometimes those things are negative that we say about the other person because they'll do something that you feel is not right or whatever it is. And you have to get it out. Otherwise, it turns into storage in your body and you grow a lump somewhere because you store that negative energy in your body. So you do have to get it out. But where you get it out is so important to integrity and having smoothness. And the less you say, the better you are.
Life lessons. Oh, it's interesting. Esther, you mentioned having a coach in sort of a off the cuff way, the person who was the manager of your building gave you advice because she herself had been divorced. Just a specific question. Do you have a coach also that you have worked with, not just for business, but in the divorce proceedings?
I
Are you
did.
asking me or Esty?
Yeah, I'm asking Estee for the
Okay,
moment.
good.
We know you do.
I actually did not have any official coach. I had mentors, guides, colleagues, friends, one in particular who's just an outstanding human with a very deep understanding of human psychology. And his whole teaching is about the balance of power. And he really reined me in.
Okay, but you had someone.
I had someone to talk to about, like, okay, I can't breathe right now, so I'm going to call you, and you're going to help me before I talk to any other humans or go out in public anywhere where there are other beings.
Okay, so I just want to make sure, I want everybody to understand.
Yeah.
This is not, as much as the I is, it's a journey of you, and therefore reaching out to somebody, as Joe said, having a coach. Esty, having somebody right. Laurie, you are a coach to many people in the process, either of divorcing, contemplating it, or resuming marriage. So let's, again, talk about this idea of, say, finding the good, or using words in relationships.
That's a big one. Words are really what I coach people on. I have things that people should say, or there's specific words that you say in certain situations, and I teach people that language. It's a language. So what Joe was saying about how we need to have like one or two confidants if you're pulling the string on a divorce, that they are the two people that you can call at any time to tell them exactly how you feel. I call it vomiting. So you call them and you tell them, don't answer your phone. And then you call them and you leave them a voicemail. They may never listen to it. You don't need an answer. You just need someplace to dump it. And once you do that, you go, I feel better. Now, if you do that to a child, that's going to be very destructive to their future. So a lot of people that I coach will say, oh, but I need to tell my child this, that his father behaves this way, because when he grows up, he can't behave like that. I get that. However, when you're in the heat of the moment and things are very stressed, if you relay that information to your child, it's going to be out of anger. What we do instead is we write it down, and we write out the whole conversation, and we sit there and we go, what can my kid take from this? And if it's, hey, don't ever call your spouse names when you're in an argument. Okay, so you write that in a journal that you say for your child. So when they're 21, you go, here's all these things you need to learn. You can call it mom's rules or whatever it is. But Find a way to get that information to your child, because when they're young, all they do is stare at you. Your kids watch you 24 hours a day. They stare at you closely, more so than television, because they're learning how they're going to behave. And the way you behave today is how they're going to behave tomorrow. So you can change that. They can't behave like that when they're adults because they have to learn from me. Okay, if you tell them that, they might not listen. If you show them that, they're going to know what to do.
You mentioned about language, and I remember as a young man courting my wife, or my about-to-be wife, and even before that, when I was romantically involved with other men and women and such in my life, we used to call it the language of love. I think what you're doing now, each one of you, and thank you for this, by the way, and I think there'll be many thousands of people around the world who will be thank you. We're talking about the language of divorce, and I'm looking for, in other words, not to push aside the word divorce, but the language of separation and not losing the integrity of self, and making sure that whoever is in your life, again, using children or other people in the family that you married into, that it stays in that, like you said, Lori, this language that people will remember and the behavior that they're watching. I'm going to have, this is not a setup. I hope all of you are going to laugh out loud when I show you what I have here at my right hand. I was thinking maybe I should mention it, but each of you did already. I don't know if you can see that.
No, hold it.
It says anger journal.
Yeah, I have one. I have one. I keep it. I'm human. This is what I do when I teach my Joy of Living program in the Joy of Living community. I urge everybody, whether you're happily married or you're just married or you're divorced or you're whatever, an anger journal is so important. And each one of you have mentioned it. Like Esty, I love when you not only said the word, you said, I can't breathe. I was seeing it. Because that's what happens when we're in the moment of something as traumatic and dramatic as separation from, let's be blunt, the person that at some point was our other, not significant other. It was our other. We didn't enter into marriage thinking, well, gee, I think I give this about 5 years, maybe 7. Okay, if we're really good, we might go to 15. We don't think that way. We don't even want to think that way. When we said we're here for eternity, we're here because we knew this was a match made in heaven. Okay, well, guess what? Even in heaven, they have divorces, I guess, because we're living out on life. Whatever happens on earth happens in heaven. Don't think that there's a separate place over there. Oh, yeah, over there, it's all beautiful and harps and things like that. It's just like it is here. It's the ability to live in the now with what we have and who we are in this wonderful world that each one of you is articulating so beautifully of integrity. And again, I am deeply appreciative of you making the time and energy to share all this. As I said, my anger journal was right here at my fingertips. I was going to possibly mention it, but you already did. And it's actually fundamental, I believe, to somehow channel and vent that rage that exists, especially in the midst of this thing called divorce. It is a powerful, powerful event. I want to go back to something that is not part of the questions, but certainly you, Joe, and Esther, you mentioned it, that part of this happened in your particular cases during the COVID period, right? Now, some sort of a lame question, but I just want to be outspoken about it, because apparently this happened with a lot of people. Did the COVID process bring to bear something that was already in process? Or in other words, did it exacerbate that which was happening? Or did it arise almost by itself? And you sort of woke up and said, oh, I don't want to be in this place anymore. This is not healthy to my mental, physical, and spiritual well-being. Esty?
In my case, it was really just, fortuitous or non-fortuitous timing. We were planning a separation before COVID hit.
Okay.
And COVID actually just delayed the process because there was nowhere to go. But we were in that process already before. So a lot of people are like, oh, COVID. I'm like, it really just happened to coincide. We were there. We were planning a separation for around March of 2020, and it got pushed off to the end of April
Beautiful
because
timing.
COVID hit, and it made it a little bit more challenging, actually. But it didn't. Yeah, it just happened. In my world, it just happened to coincide timing
But
wise.
your preparation for separation was a mutual process. In other words, you had gone to a point where you had,
Mutual is a funny word. We were both involved in the discussion, but it was at my urging. I felt that it was the last ditch effort that we could do. Our therapist agreed. Rabbis who were involved in our situation agreed. And then 2 to 3 weeks into separation, I was handed divorce papers. I was like, oh, well then I guess we're not trying this anymore, are we? Cool. Okay. Got it. So you could say it was mutual. It was complicated.
well, I would assume so because life is complicated. But you just said that it was more your initiation than your then husband, but he obviously went along with it because
Specifically, the separation was more my initiation. Yeah,
right.
it was all in the process of like therapists and rabbis and like, this isn't working, but can we save it? We could try this, we could try that. And at that point, we'd really tried everything. I remember sitting with the rabbi. He's like, what about this? I said 6 months ago. He's like, what about this? I said last week. What about this? 2 years ago. What about this? 5 years ago. I'm like, you're done. There's nothing left on your list. Trust me. We tried it all. There's one thing left on the list. That was all that was left.
And that was difficult, wasn't it?
Yeah. Listen, I like Joe come from an ultra Orthodox background. I actually come originally from just a plain Orthodox background, almost modern Orthodox, and then went super ultra Orthodox in my late teens. And the vision of family, I did not say the word divorce until months after I was handed the papers because I made a commitment when I was engaged. The therapist actually pointed this out. She was like, yeah, I was curious about that. And my ex remembered it. We had a discussion when we were either dating or engaged, that the idea of throwing the words, I told you I've been working on my words for a really long time. I wasn't joking. The idea of throwing divorce around as a threat is very detrimental to marriage. And I took upon myself, and I don't remember either of us ever mentioning divorce, by the way, our entire marriage ever. For me specifically, I took it upon myself to never utter the word divorce. I didn't say it. So I was handed divorce papers and I was trying to explain. I was like, dissolution of marriage papers. Like I couldn't say it. I could not say it. I could not own it. I could not believe it. I was so, till the last moment, we were going to work this out. Fine, separation's our last ditch effort. Great. So we're at the very end. Now it's going to get fixed. Till the last moment, I really, really believed it was going to be okay. And to me, okay meant we stay married. That was the only version of okay that I had in my head.
Powerful. Thank you, Esty.
Sure.
Whew.
Spill my guts onto the internet. Here you go.
No. It wasn't that. It was a gentle soul expressing your real being. And yes, there is a tear. There's no question. Interesting, isn't it, that the word tear we think of as something that rolls down from the eyes, but it's really the idea of divorce, tearing your being out. Joe?
So did it happen because of COVID? No, we were already we actually filed for divorce before COVID started. COVID definitely threw a pickle and a wrench in the whole thing, especially because at the beginning of COVID, people were getting sick. Everyone was getting sick. Like the first month of COVID, my former wife went to the hospital and we didn't know if she was going to make it. Like it was that bad. Like it was like everybody was praying for her and it was really, really bad. And the kids were super worried, and everybody was concerned. And COVID was just a very difficult time. The kids were home from school. There was a lot of hecticism, trying to get computers. Imagine having 5 kids all trying to learn from school at the same time. It was just a lot of craziness and hecticness. The whole world was in turmoil. Um, and but just divorce just takes a long time. It's something that, having an agreement on custody, having an agreement on financial matters, that stuff just you have to agree. And if you're not in a place where you guys can agree, there has to be a back and forth. I love the concept of the anger journal. Somebody else told me, write a letter to your wife, but don't send it to her if you're ever upset to your former wife. So I found myself writing a lot of letters that I never sent, because another piece of advice that I got from someone is like, do not talk to your divorce attorney about any issues that you have with your former wife, because that's a really great way to rack up a massive bill. So instead, all the issues that I had and all the complaints that I had, and of course, I'm a normal human. I have a lot of issues, a lot of complaints, a lot of things to say, not positive, not negative, just like things to say. I wrote them all down. I got all the thoughts off my chest, and I was able to be present, and I was able to just be there for the children. There are 4 types of marriages. There's the starter marriage. There's the parenting marriage. There's the personal development marriage, and there's the soulmate marriage. And often a marriage can be either with one person or with multiple people, depending on where you are in your own personal development journey. And who we are at 20 is not who we are at 40. It just is.
We hope not.
And so if you're going through a parenting marriage, when the kids are of age, then what's left? Or when the kids already get to a certain place that they're self-sufficient, then, often the relationship is not there. The relationship needs to be an entity on its own. Just like a business is an entity on its own. There's 2 whole individuals that come together and need to nurture that whole relationship. And if the relationship is missing, and you're connected financially and you're connected parentally, it could be an issue, especially if you don't agree on things. And somebody has to decide. And if there is no agreement, the state has an agreement for you. If there is no will, the state has a will for you. If there's no operating agreement in a business, the state has an operating agreement for you. And so that's the situation. That's what basically divorce is. For me, it's not really divorce. It's not called divorce in my head. It's called redefining a formal relationship and making it even more formal. Redefining a relationship, it's not tearing, it's not ripping, it's not hurting, it's not damaging. People look at it as such a negative, stigmatic thing. 2 people that have no formal agreement on finances, on custody, on who needs to do what, and suddenly you're trying to document it legally because it's a legal thing. Somehow the government's involved in your sex life. Like they're involved in there and they stick themselves in, and it's okay. Listen, they're involved with everything. They're involved in your taxes. They're involved with everything. And so you got to formalize it. Imagine if when you got married, you were forced to formalize financial, custody, and everything. When you got married, that's called a prenuptial agreement. Some people do postnuptial agreements, but they don't always work. So what I would recommend is really thinking about what agreements you have with yourself. If you're going through this, know that it's just about redefining the relationship. And oftentimes what I hear from a lot of people is during the process of redefining the relationship, there's a lot of contention. There's a lot of disagreement. And people call that lack of integrity. But in order to create integrity, sometimes you got to twist things a little bit. Sometimes you got to move things a little bit. Sometimes you got to unscrew a couple things in order to get the wires to be straight. And sometimes you got to put them through the fire in order to take steel and make it into a sword. Sometimes the butterfly, as Esty loves to say, needs to go through the cocoon, not the thing that was the butterfly before, needs to go through the cocoon in order to grow wings. And I believe that if you have integrity with a divorce and you do the right thing by not gossiping, by putting the children first, by honoring your spouse. I didn't say respecting. Respect and honor are 2 different things. Honor your father and your mother. Respect your spouse. Okay, maybe you don't have respect for your spouse, but can you honor them as the father or mother of your child? Can you just honor them for being that, even if they don't provide anything else for you other than the fact that they gave you children or that they gave you their life for X amount of years, months, weeks, whatever it is? And when that relationship changes and transforms into something, it can be more magical. Here's what I believe firmly. I believe that everything that happens in my life and in everyone else's life happens in their favor. Often people can't see it because they're looking at life at through the wrong perspective. If your glasses are pink, everything will look pink. And if your glasses are blue, everything will look blue. And if you're not wearing glasses, maybe you can't see. So put on a pair of glasses. Somebody else's perspective. And my perspective is that everything happens in my favor. And this is definitely not only in my favor, in my kids' favor. And like I said, didn't just happen now. It's generational trauma. And we're repairing that. And through repairing that by redefining the language of the relationship and how things work and making it more formal.
Let me make mention of two things you said, and we're up against our time, and I want to have Lori. This has been exceeding expectations, kids. This is wonderful. I really applaud and I think it's the place where we'll start next time, that the D word does not have to be like the C word. People say, okay, D can be defining a new process, because you said so nicely, you're not the same person at 40 that you were at 20, because if you are, there's something wrong with you and in the whole process of life. Let's be blunt. Wonderful, Lori. Let's, on a very high level, tell us about COVID and the people that you work with. Did it change much? Did it accelerate things for people who wanted to be in the divorce mode?
I actually, in my work, I saw it kind of the opposite. Like, people that were working with me had a chance to be together with their husband without the stress of having to go to the office and having to get the kids ready and having all these sports to go to. So it slowed things down a bit. So they were able to kind of come back together and have some time. So I had a lot of marriages find themselves again. But I did have a lot of new people that showed up who were, I'm getting divorced. What do I do? So yeah, I saw it both ways. But I mean, everything the two of these guys have said already is exactly what I agree with. So I don't really have much to add, except that, we are who we are, and what we bring to the table is what leads us on the path to goodness or bitter.
And on that high note, I'm going to ask that, God willing, we'll do this again. Is that acceptable, kids? Yeah, we'll do another one.
Do it again, baby. Let's do it again.
Yes, thank you. And I would like Lori to, if you would be so kind, to share your story when we begin, because I think it will be instructive for Esty and Joe and everybody else out there, because it is quite an interesting story, and why you are the wife expert, and why I love working with you and talking about you and talking about human nature and such. I'm going to end up on a fairly high note that I think you'll appreciate, Joe, because you mentioned it. I thank God right now I'm speaking again to human beings. I was at a place here in I live in Henderson, Nevada, which is outside of Las Vegas, and I just attended a ultimate speakers competition, and there were just so many wonderful people in the audience, no mask, and it was just wonderful being with humans again. And we each had a chance to speak, and I'm happy to tell you I won the competition. Okay, that's very nice. But when I speak to people, I ask everybody in the audience, I said, how many people here know what the word paranoia means? And every hand goes up. Everybody knows what paranoia means, right? Okay, I said, okay, how many people here know what pronoia means? Right. And I spoke by the biggest audience I spoke with over the past couple of years, 5,263 people. Out of 5,263 people, 2 hands went up. So I called one of the people way in the back, and I asked, what does it mean? He said, well, I don't know, but I wanted to be a contrarian, so I raised my hand. But the other person I asked, you know what it means? She answered yes. Pronoia is what you were just talking about, Joe. Paranoia means, there's something happening. Oh my gosh, I don't know what it is, but it's not going to be good. That's paranoia, correct? Pronoia is everything is conspiring for my benefit. Great word. Most people don't know it.
How do you spell it?
Pronoia, Pronoia, pronoia. And you would think that everybody should know that word as much as they know paranoia.
Is it an actual word, or did you make it up?
Yeah, it's a real word. I didn't make it up.
I
I mean,
love
even if I did, you still love me, right?
Of course, I would still love you, but pronoia, it's like
But
it
no, it's a
sounds
real word. So I
sounds
just
like a
want to
name.
make sure
This is my absolute new favorite word. I just made
Right?
it's getting added to the wall.
Pronoia.
Which, by the way, that's the third sticky wall I have. I'm running
Yeah.
out of house.
But
Everything is
playing, we're
conspiring for my
riffing.
benefit.
This
This
is
is like
what-
my mantra. But I love that you've got one word that says it.
So this is beautiful. This is what the purpose of this webinar of The Voice with Integrity is not to be like this. It's to, come out of the cocoon, to be the butterfly, to feel the positive, purposeful, powerful, pleasant energy of growing and doing and being and recognizing that everything conspires for benefit. That's why we're here, each one of us, given of your time. We thank you, and all the thousands of people listening. And please share this with everybody you know, because share stands for spreading happiness and rejuvenating energy. And that's what this has all been about. So I'd like to do two things as we wrap up. Number one is to do a group hug. And I'll tell you what hug stands for, and then we'll give a blessing. Hug stands for heartfelt, unlimited giving. On the count of three. 1, 2, 3. And our blessing is go forth. Live exuberantly. Spread the seeds of joy, happiness, peace, and love. Go mad. Go make a difference. Bye, everybody. Thank you.